Hello, everyone. My name is Varshene. I'm from Irvine High School, and I'm going to be moderating the Truth About Media panel. And so I'll just give everyone a chance to introduce themselves as well. So anyone can go ahead.
So hi, my name is Kim Mayorga. I am from Eagle Valley High School in Colorado. My pronouns are she and her. And yeah, that's a little bit about myself is that I intend to go to college into film and journalism to study film and journalism and as well minor in dance.
I think I've been Zoom picked. Hi everyone. My name is Jadon. Great to join everyone this morning. My pronouns are he him. I'm originally from Kingston, Jamaica. Currently living down in South Florida. I lead communications for a global nonprofit organization called Open Source Medical Supplies. Uh, I'm just really excited to join and be a part of this critical conversation.
Hi, my name is Amy Crouch. I'm also so excited to be here. I use she, hers pronouns, and let's see. I'm currently a junior at Cornell University. I'm studying linguistics and English. And I'm also the author of the upcoming book, My Tech Wise Life, which is coming out in less than a month, about my experiences growing up in a family that took healthy technology use very seriously, and my hopes for how our generation can move forward in a really healthy way. So it's wonderful to be here.
Hi, my name is Lia Salvatierra. I'm currently a freshman at UNC Chapel Hill studying journalism, and I'm originally from Palo Alto, California.
And so one of the questions that I wanted to begin with is all of you guys have addressed truth in media from a different angle. So how would you answer this question? So what aspects of deception or untruths kind of drew you to your mission? And what do you think our generation could do in order to find out the truths and separate the misconceptions and things like that? So Amy, maybe you want to start.
Sure. Yeah, this is such a big question. And I think we can all have different answers that are all really important. So I'm curious to see what everyone else has to say. I think for me, I feel like we're seeing this big problem both on a macro scale and on a micro scale in media, which is the problem of clickbait, or the need to create something which is kind of appealing to both individual people's eyeballs and the algorithm. I feel like we can both see this at like a macro level in news media, where even if the facts of a story are true, you need to kind of distort it or not need to, but there's a tendency to distort that truth in order to create something that people will click on and angrily share. But the really interesting thing is we also see this in our own like private social media, like on a really micro level, that even whatever the pictures that somebody shares to Instagram or videos somebody uploads also have to have that element of being like appealing to that faceless algorithm. And so I think this is a really tricky problem, that the internet does not necessarily reward truth. It rewards things that people want to click on. And it's really hard to say how we fix that, to be honest. I almost feel that maybe we have to build something entirely new, create something which is not about whatever people will click on the most, but it's really difficult to say how to do that. And I'm just very hopeful that our generation, which is full of such smart and talented people, that we can really be thinking outside the box and not be kind of beholden to the ideas of how things work that were invented 10 years ago.
That's amazing. Yeah, I do agree. And Leah, do you want to continue?
Yeah, I think personally that, the biggest issue too I just saw from watching The Social Dilemma is I think that like personalizing people's news feeds and information feeds based on stuff they already know, is like there can be regulations made against that. I think that like there, you know, there's kind of this there's, you know, idea that like you can have all data, but do you actually need all data? And the problem is it's not in the financial interest of these companies to stop their data like collection and consumption. And so I think it's more important that kind of regulations are put in place to say that like, I mean, because personally, I mean, I believe that like, especially politically, like it is going to not help anyone if we're going to continue to like, it basically like give two people two completely different information sets like across the web, and they're never gonna like face-to-face interact with each other. Like that's creating like this society in which like you can't even have arguments because you don't even have any idea what the other side is seeing. And so I think that like if that like social like societal issue is like kind of brought into like legal terms and laws and regulations, like I think that's the only way that the companies are going to be held accountable, because it's not in their financial interest to change anything. And I think also that having like if we're just going to speak politically, like encouraging dialogue around politics at a younger age, because I think it's something like I just turned 19. It's my first election, or I voted in the primaries, but like this is the only age in which we're actually told that we should be engaged with politics and be engaged with like having our own thoughts and ideas. And if you're not going to encourage that conversation, like alongside being raised with technology, you're not going to be able to form your own opinions. And so I think that there needs to be a really important, it's just like, you know, if you're going to start sex ed, when people have technology, like conversation about technology, like there needs to be conversations about everything you're exposed to on the media, because otherwise you're not raising kids that understand how to use it, and understand how biased everything that they see on the internet is.
And going off of that, what have your personal experiences with media and just the truth about media been? We can continue with Kim.
So I know like personally, like since I'm like in high school, like around like high schoolers, like their life revolves around social media. Like you constantly see like teachers reminding like students to put their phones away, or to just, and it's just like that thing. And then growing like personally, like as a person that's like really like into social media, like I'm like really active on social media. Like I see this a lot, and like something that I've been thinking about is it's weird that I find like similar to how Amy and Leah were talking about how we have like personalized feeds. I was thinking about this because I had a conversation with my mom about like this article that was written about me. And in it, I explained how I had never experienced racism. And she looked over at me and she said that she found it funny that I said that. And so keep in mind, like my mom, like I'm from a Mexican family. And she said that she found it funny that I had said that I had never experienced racism when in this past environment we had. And I just found it weird, because why is it that she saw this as racism, and everything that this person did to us, I saw it as just, you know, like her personality. Like I associated it with her personality. Like I thought that's how she was. And it just brought this idea about how, you know, we all have different experiences. We like no one has the same, no one goes through the same thing. No one goes through like things the same way. Like for example, I cannot tell my mom that that was not racism, because then that would be undermining her. And it just goes to show how like, yeah, we all have like our different experiences, and we cannot account for like other people's. And like in the social, like in media, how they were talking about how it's personalized, you know, we're only seeing one side of like one side of social media. We're only seeing like the things that target us. Like for example, on my feed, I do not see anything about all lives matter. But to be educated on topics like this, shouldn't I be able to understand both sides and like know both sides and have knowledge of them, so then I can make like my opinions and form my, you know, form my things and have a solid base education of both sides, so it's not like one-sided. And yeah, that's basically all I can think of right now.
And sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Jadon. Would you like to talk about your personal experience?
Yeah, no, thank you, Varshene. That's definitely the pronunciation of my name. But thank you. Like, I think everybody on the panel has just like brought such a critical perspective with their own experiences within the media. And for me, it's a little bit different because I've lived in the world of media from that of being a consumer, reading, using social media. But I have also worked as the executive producer for an entertainment network, and currently in my role as the head of communications for this organization, I spend my days writing press releases to get the attention of people. So that there's a unique balance in our lives, and I think we're at a place where even for organizations, there are just so many things competing for individual attention. All your favorite companies, and that's the list probably runs pretty long, and including companies that you just interacted with once. They're kind of throwing you back on their radars. This is somebody I want to get to. This is somebody I want to talk to again. This is somebody I want to convince to take some form of action. And then there are people out there like me who are marketers, who are communicators, who will relentlessly put certain efforts into getting your attention. And that's just because social media has made it so easy for many other things to take up your attention. So in the past, people just put up billboards, people run radio ads, people do TV and different forms of traditional media as a way of getting your attention. But now we're in a place where even the smallest companies with $5 as their advertising budget could literally run Facebook ads, Twitter ads, Instagram ads, as a way of just being in your face all the time. And I don't think the system was particularly we've literally, I have a friend who shares this concept. He works at Google, and he says that if you're not paying for the service, that's because something to the line of you're the service, or you're the thing that allows the service to make money. And we see this with these platforms today. And I feel like the ethical question that comes is that we get that this wasn't the intention when these platforms were being designed. And there's this grand mission to connect people all across the world, but we can't ignore the externalities of what is coming. And even if the intentions do not necessarily equal the outcomes that we're seeing today, then how do we bring it back to this place of the ethics? And journalists have an ethical code that they're supposed to go to, which is very similar to the one shared by doctors, which is do no harm, and ensuring that the news that we're sharing is to some extent balanced, informed, and adds to the critical conversations that is happening around whatever topic that is. So how do we, in the same way that journalists are supposed to respect do no harm, how do we actually actively encourage that within our communities? And equally, how do we hold these platforms that we give our information and our data to, how do we hold them accountable for their role in practicing these ethical behaviors and not creating things that use human psychology to just trick or poor teenagers into just clicking away. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
That's actually a great question. So bouncing off of that, would anyone like to answer? How do we hold them accountable? Does Leah want to continue?
I honestly think that there's, especially just in just regarding bias in general, I think that especially just in high schools and in public school settings, especially there's almost an avoidance of that conversation just based on state laws and just keeping the classroom kind of comfortable and not almost just not treading on that kind of subject. And so I think that it's something that I don't even think I was really angry about until I was in over my gap year and moving into college. I didn't really realize how much I personally was just myself along with anybody else was being almost taken advantage of and manipulated kind of in my liberal sphere in a sense. And the fact that I, was made to make presumptions and have all these opinions of places I'd never been, of people that I'd never met, and kind of feel very polarized and like almost like be not like I wasn't encouraged at all to like listen to anybody else's opinions, and I think that that's something that I've really had to unlearn. And I think that like it kind of comes from like a sort of fundamental place of like actually respecting and wanting to hear other people's ideas, which I think is like that kind of tolerance I think is not taught in schools. You're taught to like tolerate, you know, you're taught to tolerate like certain things, but I think like other ideas is like it kind of fades once you get older, because you can't have your own ideas and you can't have independence from your parents and you can't have independence from your friends and your other organizations. And so I think that like in general, especially at schools that live in like, you know, microcosms of like different ideologies, like you're not gonna really foster tolerance if everyone has the same opinion. And so like, I mean, I went from California to the South, and like I think even just in general, like the conversations that I have in my political science classes, like there is almost there's a much greater tone of like respect and appreciation from both sides than I've ever experienced in my educational career. And I think that I really respect how I've heard everyone else speak about their like educational experiences. And I think it's just like fostering tolerance and fostering like an actual curiosity for like the other side and actual like willingness to engage in conversation rather than just like, because if you have, it's like it's someone's handing your information to you at a plate. You don't, it's so much easier to just swallow that up. And so I think that like there needs to be like encouragement from adults, especially to like actually like want to hear out other people's opinions. And I think that that's hard because adults a lot of the time are pretty set in their opinion. So they're not going to be seeking out, you know, like other, like they don't really want, at a certain point, they're not going to want to be changed. But I think that like it's encouraging that level, especially just like from high school and up. And like, because I mean, high schoolers these days are very, very interested in becoming like socially active. And so I think that like being upset and angry is something that like can happen if we're actually like specifically focusing on media bias and like the unfairness that it creates for our generation.
If you don't mind, I would love to jump in because I loved a word that Lia just used, which is curiosity. I think that is such a wonderful way of framing the idea of tolerance. Like, tolerance is a very good thing, but sometimes it can sound basically like, ugh, I'll just put up with this person who disagrees with me. Not that I like them very much, but I'll deal with them. But I love this idea that if we really want to create a society in which we can engage with disagreeing views and something that's not just an echo chamber, we need to have a kind of curiosity about other people. Why do you hold this conviction about whatever, healthcare? What kinds of personal experiences shaped these opinions? And I mean, again, it's really difficult to come up with like concrete solutions, but I really like the idea of approaching the question of like, you know, exposing people to different viewpoints, not as like abstract, different ideas, but in the form of learning from different people. Because so much of our, you know, our political and kind of sociological viewpoints are shaped by our experiences. And so I think it could be really wonderful to try to prioritize, especially in kind of middle school, high school, as you're saying, hearing from human beings about why they hold the beliefs they do and what kinds of experiences prompted that. And that won't necessarily persuade you, and it doesn't need to, but it can foster, I think, a much more kind of loving and thoughtful political sphere, rather than something where you're just like yelling at abstract ideas of what a disagreeing person would be like.
And if I could just follow up after you, Amy, you know, and this is one of those areas where I am most critical of modern social media platforms, because not only have many of these platforms allowed for people to hide behind internet identities, and these people just like throw out some of the most ridiculous things into the world. Um, And the reason I'm critical of them, or even as us as consumers of these medias, I feel like as a society we have lost the ability to connect at a much deeper level, because a lot of these individuals, once they're confronted in person and they realize that their words, their actions are actually talking about other human beings who bleed the same blood, then it's most times than not they're apologizing for their behavior in the first place. So if we could move some of these critical dialogues that we need to engage in as a part of our like civil duties as citizens, then we need to pull some of those into, like, people need to be stuck into a room together and forced to figure it out, forced to find some middle ground that we can all stand on, because people deserve the basic liberties to do so. And I feel like it's gonna be the greatest way to tackle bias is through this empathy, is through teaching people that, hey, like, at the end of the day, it's like, what's promoting the greatest good for society. And even though you might hold an opinion that's different than mine, is it truly rooted in the fact that you differ on like the most moral level, or is this just because you're affiliated with a particular group and it's just easy to say mean things to me on the internet behind your like pseudo identity? Yeah.
Kim, would you like to continue?
Yeah, so like adding on to like what, I'm so sorry, I can't pronounce her name and I don't want to say it wrong. But adding on to what he said was, so basically like what something that I've noticed is, like, as a person that's like very active in social media and like I post a lot, and like I've gotten into like arguments with like kids on my comments, or they've slid up in my DMs and they'll be like saying all these things to me, like they'll be commenting all these bad things and like saying all of these things, but yet, like, for example, there's a kid in our school that will go off and say that there isn't racism in our county, and they'll make all of these claims that we live in this perfect society, and but yet we'll be reading like Frederick Douglass, or we'll be reading Nikki Giovanni in our classes, and he won't say anything there. Like, we'll be having discussions in person, but he will not say anything there. Why is it that he has like this power on social media to be like voicing all of these big things, and if like saying that he cares about these things, but yet like when we're in a setting, he doesn't say anything? But as well, like, I was just having a conversation with someone the other day, and I had never looked at this viewpoint, and she was like talking about how, what if they're shy? And like looking at this kid, like having interacted with him in past environments, and like in the past, he's not a shy person. Like, I have personally heard him like attack people. Like, he's told friends of mine to go back to their country, but yet, like, when we're in a setting where that conversation is open and people can discuss it, he doesn't say anything, and it's just kind of weird to me. But at the same time, like, I will never understand why that is, because I cannot be in his head. And just as well, like, adding on to like what Leo was saying about how like the biasing in our schools, I feel like something that we should start doing is like, yeah, like advocating for it to be taught in our schools. Like, because personally, like we're not really talked about it. Like, we're given one choice. We're given, like how she said, we're served it on a plate. And like as a young child, like that's all they think. That's all they think there is. And it creates like this dilemma, because now when they like start growing up, that they think that's all that there is.
To kind of continue on, and a lot of you guys have already touched upon it a bit, what kind of next action steps should we take? Anyone can go ahead. Leah, if you'd like to continue.
I mean, I think also one thing I was just going to say too is I think that like in general, I was lucky enough to go to a school that like had a great journalism program, and our first assignment in beginning journalism was to interview a random person and just to find out something about their life. And I think that just plays into what Amy was talking about too with curiosity. I just think that in general, like it's really interesting that like journalists and the media are the ones creating the most bias, because I personally, when I'm like writing stories, like I'm like, when I know like we have to do practice assignments for just like learning how to write. And like when I'm given all the information and facts, like it's so boring to write out that story because like I'm not learning anything. It's like a fake city, a fake person, a fake place. But like if I'm given an assignment where I have no idea what the outcome is going to be, like that's the story that I want to write. And I think that like the thing that kind of is really interesting and like what I am curious like about trying to, when I'm looking for jobs is like what I want to write for a paper that like I would know the opinions and the perspectives and the answers to the questions that everybody I talk to would say. And I think that that's where it gets really twisted because I don't feel like there's thousands of journalists out there happy to just write stories they already know the answers to. And so I think that like, it kind of comes from like understanding and like encouraging like the energy that comes with not knowing, and like also that the fact that like there is, you don't have to win conversations, and like I think that it's kind of there are like debate clubs and all of that goes on in high school that encourages like the competition of opinions. And I think that like encouraging like papers and stuff where it's like you're not necessarily trying to win an argument, you're just trying to make one. And I think that like that's kind of it if as much as there are technical solutions, which I do believe in terms of like regulation, like I honestly think that it obviously our teachers already have so much on them, but I think that it comes from adults and parents and like just generally the situations we foster, and like really trying to maybe rethink like how especially just in like more like English classrooms, history classrooms especially, like how also just like I could go on about our history education in America and how biased it is, but like I think that it comes from like how you're framing like the want to like not know things, because in school you're like taught to know X, Y, and Z. And like I think that it comes from like, of course, like being willing to like be embarrassed or be proved wrong, or like and creating that safe space for doing so, because I'm sure like what Kim was saying, that kid doesn't speak up because he's worried he's going to be told he's wrong. And like maybe you can think that, I can think that, but like it's about creating a space where like someone can like say what they want to say as long as it's not active hate speech, and like that be okay. And I think especially on college campuses that's like a really heated topic too, because of speakers that come in and like should be allowed to host speakers that have opinions that are potentially harmful and hurtful to people. Like should those or like is it more powerful to turn a blind eye and have no one show up, or is it more powerful to block them from coming to campus? So I think that I personally like I thought that I was on the opinion of in the mindset of like we shouldn't let them come to campus, but I think it's more powerful to like either go and hear them out and just like listen, or just turn a blind eye and just like let their opinions be heard and not be reacted to, because I think too that also fuels the fire.
And I apologize, that was actually a question from our audience. So from now on, I'm just going to be taking some questions from our audience. This question was quite popular. They wanted to ask you guys, how do you define truth? Maybe that be in terms of media or anything else. Amy, would you like to continue?
Okay, this question is like several thousand years old and nobody has figured it out, so it's a little unfair. But thinking about kind of the specific applications, not necessarily trying to come up with a philosophical answer. Yeah, thinking about like practically for news, what a truthful representation of a situation is maybe. Let's see. I think kind of going back to what I was saying about clickbait, maybe we can say that as journalists aim for truth, they should be aiming for something independently of whether it confirms their own beliefs, confirms their audience's beliefs, or confirms even like the beliefs of the advertisers who they want to appear on their news page. And I think that that goal of setting aside whether something will be popular can help filter out the kinds of pressures that can be on a journalist to distort truth. I'm aware that I kind of skipped the most difficult thing, which is what actually is the truth. But I think that that's, honestly, that's not a question that we can, I actually do believe in objective truth as a philosophical thing, but when it comes to the situation of an individual trying to like cover an event or discuss a viewpoint, in that case, there will be a lot of different angles to approach the situation that can have elements of truth in them. And I think perhaps in that sense, it's really important to be promoting a kind of diversity of viewpoints so that we can aim at the most nuanced and hopefully most truthful understanding of the situation possible.
I think that's a great way to explain it. And another question from the audience was, Jadon, people wanted you to speak about your work on COVID misinformation, if you'd like to elaborate on it. Oh, that's okay. If there's
Yeah, okay, sorry. I was trying to unmute. So with COVID misinformation specifically, one of the very early in the days of COVID, one of the things we realized was happening was that like people were just presenting alternative facts about the disease, about the virus, about its spread and its containment. So my organization, we started centralizing resources and became a reliable and truthful source about COVID-19 information, and then we amplify that effort through a massive translate. Like we had over 700 translators, and then we did something called translation and localization, meaning that what localization is that in different cultures things are represented in different ways. So as we translated these documents, we gave them to people who are experts in, if we're translating something from Brazil and we're making it Brazilian Portuguese, the examples you see would be relevant to you if you lived in Brazil, so that we could break down that language barrier and really helped people to just kind of get the right information. And I really absolutely love this question about truth. Because it is a great question, and in hearing the question I was like, oh wow, like I don't actively have a definition of truth, but I do look at truth in a very interesting way. And I do want to say, as somebody who has worked in journalism myself, there are countless amount of I'll use the term creator since it's like so relevant these days, and I'm sure somebody in our audience is a creator, whether or hoping to become a creator at some time in the near future. But there are many people out there. There are many journalists, many creators who are not actively out to get you with the information that they're sharing. And Jeff Orlovsky is just an example of a creator who has presented information that people can use to form their own opinions based on other people's perspective or just some insights that they've shared with you. And there are many sources out there that are partisan, non-partisan, that just want to inform you, but we as consumers, we tend not to give these people the time of day because they don't align with our own biases. So I always say the best thing you can do to become a responsible consumer of media is to check your own bias first, and then check the bias of the different outlets that you start associating with, because most times than not, we have our bias first, and then we kind of start looking to platforms that share like the same opinions, and that's where the polarization tends to happen. And then as it relates to this whole concept of truth, I feel like the truth must do two things, and this is a responsibility for journalists. It needs to agree with the facts, or it should make a case for what the actual situation is, regardless of just like what your opinion about these specific things are. And I feel like that's what a journalist can do responsibly. And then people might say to me then, wow, the truth is so like hard to decipher. And you know, the reality is, if we take a ruler and we push it into a bucket of water, then that very straight ruler will appear bent. But does that change the fact that because it appears bent, does that change the fact that the ruler is actually straight? Or is that just contradictory? I mean, which one feels like a factor, or which one just feels like information for you? So I feel like just kind of weighing it and using that as like an active example of, well, is it because they're framing it this way? Is the ruler still like straight, or are they just like presenting it as being bent to mess with my head?
Kim, would you like to continue with that?
I feel like something that we could like work on, or like try and find like a solution or like a way to help, is finding a way to hold people accountable for their actions, and finding a way to, you know, like for example, if you're like for journal, like as a like for journalists, like finding a way to hold certain journalists accountable for their actions and letting them know that what they say does affect people, and people are going to see that, and that people are going to see what they're saying, and they're going to go around and spread it. And if it's the wrong, it's like if it's the wrong information, you know, people are going around spreading wrong information. For example, like I was going through my Snapchat, and I saw on this kid's story, it was after the vice presidential debate, and he was talking about how the Pence side of the debate in China was blocked throughout the whole debate, that China could only see what the one side. And like I was like, whoa, like is that true? So I started thinking about it, and so like I went and researched it up, and it turns out like I went to like multiple sources, and it turns out it was just 3 minutes of the debate that was blocked out. And it was like during the part where Pence was talking about COVID and about how it was China's fault. And I just found it kind of weird. Like I was like, you know, he has a following. People listen to him. People like him. So what if there are people out there that are not going to research it and like see if it's actually true? And what if they're out there spreading that around? And it's just kind of like we should be holding those people accountable for their actions, and people should be able to like fact check. Like if they're going to post something, they should be able to fact check it and make sure that their source is not like a biased source, and, you know, check it up with like multiple sources behind that, and just kind of holding people accountable for their actions and knowing that their actions are going to affect people.
That's a great input. And we didn't get to all the questions. We end in about 2 minutes, but I just wanted to give you guys a chance to give any final statements to the audience or to anyone watching right now. What would be something to take away from this panel? Anyone can go ahead.
I think one thing I wanted to add on as quickly as possible. I did a lot of work in high school regarding like how mental health and suicide were portrayed in the media. And I think that like the reason that that was such an important and pressing topic was because of how much immediate harm it could cause in terms of suicide contagion. And I think that like if you can reframe like all media as actually having that much immediate harm upon like just in general like our polarizing society, because it's, I mean, watching The Social Dilemma was scary. Like we're coming to a point at which like if we cannot feel the immediate like sensations of harm or fear or whatever, like it's coming in like a much greater sense. And so I think that the way that, you know, you're looking at immediate harm in media and immediate harm and bias, and like wording and phrasing and just like how you can use language to like portray something, like I think that there should be, unfortunately you can't have a ton of foresight for this, but I think that there should be kind of a standard to which like bias is held and like how you're able to write about things, because you know, as much as like misinformation hurts, like the way that things are framed can hurt in the long term. And just as much as you should portray someone's death as like, you know, just them passing rather than sensationalizing suicide, like you should be able to portray something without having to sensationalize whatever that topic's on. And I think I think that there should be a universal standard on that front.
I think we heard a lot of amazing opinions today, and I'm really thankful that we got to hear all of them. We unfortunately have to end now. It is 8:55, but I encourage the audience to go back to the agenda and go attend another panel, and don't miss Jeff Orlowski and Tristan Harris later today. But thank you guys so much for sharing. I think the audience and everyone here agrees that you guys are all very insightful and brilliant. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Varshene, for moderating.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.